right, good afternoon or good morning, depending on which time zone you are in. Welcome to the session, Top 5 NG9-1-1 Validations. Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and all attendees have been put on mute for quality assurance purposes. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A button that's located at the bottom of the screen. They will be answered at the end of the presentation. If there's a question that does warrant us stopping in the middle of the presentation, I will jump in as the moderator and interrupt April. Before I go on much further, my name is Carrie Brennan. I am the Director of Client Relations here at Datamark, and I will be monitoring the chat today. I also wanted to let you know about some of the other sessions that are happening later today. Following this presentation is a presentation by Mike King from Esri on important COVID-19 response resources for us in the PSAP. Following that, we've got catastrophic events. Is your PSAP ready? And then mitigating risk around non-conforming address scenarios. So those sessions will be taking place after this particular one. I wanted to introduce you as well to April Kaiser. April is a public safety GIS product specialist here with Datamark. She has over 20 years of experience in the engineering, water, and software industries. April has experience in developing and maintaining GIS systems, including SDE, database design, system administration, implementation and configuration, business and spatial analysis, data development, and programming. April's role has included services such as analysis, management, website and application design, and education. Prior to joining Datamark, April served as the GIS department manager at Michael Baker International. And April is a GISP and involved in a number of different state and national organizations. So with that, I am going to turn things over to April.
Thank you, Carrie. Can you hear me okay? Just making sure. Great. So thank you, Carrie. Like Carrie mentioned, my name is April Kaiser. I'm a GIS product specialist with Datamark. My background is in GIS, so I just wanted to let you know that I'm at this presentation today with the GIS emphasis. So again, we're going to be talking about the top 5 validations for next generation 911. And I am going to turn off my video just for my presentation, just to ensure that I have the best quality and making sure that you can still hear me, right, Carrie?
April, you're going to have to turn your camera back on. We cannot hear you.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. You're back now.
Okay, well, I'll just keep my video on. No problem, just to make sure. So thank you again for joining me today. All right, let me get my presentation going. My agenda. Today I'm going to be talking about why GIS is important in the next generation 911. And I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. I really want to touch on it just to get an introduction into it. But this week I've heard some really great presentations that go a little bit deeper into why GIS is important in next generation 911, the hows, the whys, the purposeful order. So I'm not going to go into it too much, but I would be happy to point you into a couple of those presentations if you want more information on that. Then I'm going to go into what a validation is. And then we're going to talk really briefly about the differences between GIS validations for next generation 911 and CAD validations. And then finally, I'm going to get into my top 5 validations, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. Okay, so why next generation 911? I hope to sum it up with one slide. Ta-da! the phone, the landline, there it is. And that is me. Well, that might be me. But that is my phone of my youth. That is what I used to communicate through my youth, through middle school, through high school. And I definitely had that cord that I would wrap around my house and annoy all my siblings. But that's how we communicated in my youth, in the past. That's how we're communicating now. Right now, we communicate in so many different ways. We carry our mobile devices with us wherever we go. We text, we talk on the go, we bring our computers, we're doing our social networking, and even our cars relay information. So we need a next generation 911 system that also communicates how we're communicating. So next generation 911 is a complete overhaul of the 911 system that we know today. 911, the NG911 modernizes the 911 infrastructure to accommodate how people communicate. Like you saw in my previous slide, we are communicating way different than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. So we need a new network, we need new connectivity, we need new protocols, and we need new data. And that's where GIS comes in. So as you can see, on the left-hand side, I'm showing you our GIS data for next generation 911. We have our address points, we have our center lines, our boundaries. So all of this information is being fed into the beginning of the call. So next generation 911, the location is captured at the time the call is placed. We are now able to intersect that location information with a boundary in order for it to be routed to the right location. The call is routed to the correct public safety answering point, your PSAP, based on that location data. So it's doing that point on Polygon query. It's a geospatial call routing. And the powerful thing with GIS is that we can layer in additional information. If you have rivers that you want to add in, if you want to see where the railroads are, where the lakes are, we can layer that information in. So GIS's role in next generation 911, GIS really impacts so many things. The public safety answering point, the PSAP that we just talked about, your computer aided dispatch, your CAD and your CAD mapping, your automatic vehicle location, and your next generation 911 core services. So GIS data really serves as the foundation of the next generation 911 system. So it's mission critical data. And a next generation 911 system really is relying on this highly precise GIS location to correctly route the call. So as you can see, your validation really becomes an important part of your quality assurance plan and your quality control plan. So first, you need to have the data available. So you need the GIS data. And this might mean going out and gathering this information. Next, you need to make sure it's complete. You not only have your road center line data, but is it for the whole city? And is it not just for the major arterials? Is it for the whole and everything in your city? Are all the attributes filled out? Are all the fields inputted with the correct information? Is it accurate? Is it placed correctly on the ground? Is the address point placed correctly on the house? Is it timeless? Is it consistent? And can we rely on it? And then you repeat. So if you can see my graphic, I start with gathering my information. Then I go into the aggregating and then the creating and the remediating of that data. And then as you can see, we go into the validate, the checking of the data, and then into the correction. Now, when you validate, you're going to correct. So after you correct, you're going to validate, and then you're going to correct, and then you're going to validate, and then you publish. But you can see that it doesn't end here because data and the world is always changing. There's always going to be a new subdivision. There's always going to be a new road that is created. You once again need to gather that data. You need to update the GIS data, remediate it once again, validate it, correct it, and validate it. I think of it as washing my son's baseball pants. I have to wash and repeat until all the dirt gets out. And then finally you publish it. So you can see it as a flow. So what is a validation check? Well, really, the definition of a validation is the action of checking or proving the accuracy of something. So really, your validation checks are rules and checks performed on that GIS data. And what are we checking for? We're checking for data integrity. Is your data complete? Do you have all of the information you need? Do you have all the address points on the houses? Your data integrity. We check for data discrepancies. So do you have two address points that have the exact same information? And then you check for topology. And as you can see, these rules and checks, it's like saying yes, check, yes, check, yes, check. And the rules and the checks, your validation comes to you as a report. It's a report of all the issues that were encountered during your validation. It doesn't necessarily fix things automatically for you. It just gives you that report. Now, some of these issues can be given to you in the form of a spatial layer that you can use to help fix your data, but really it's a report. So it's a report that issues where you can take the issues and you review them, and then you correct them, or you mark them as exceptions. All right, so next generation 911 and CAD validations. Just wanted to touch on this because sometimes we hear my GIS or my data validates correctly in my CAD system, so I'm good to go. Well, that might not always be the case because from our experience, we know that there are different CAD systems that may have different schemas. And excuse me, just because it validates within that CAD schema doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to validate correctly in a next generation 911 schema. There could be different rules. So the validations could contain different rules. It may not always be spatial. And then it's important to note that the validations are relevant to the CAD functions that you're validating, which may not necessarily be related to next generation 911 or for call routing. So those validations are specific to that CAD system. Whereas the next generation 911, our validations are their standalone group of validations validating the GIS data. We have specific requirements for integrity and topology, which we'll talk about soon. And then it's one standard schema. We're validating for one standard schema and for one purpose. All right, so let's get into our top 5 validation checks. I picked my top 5. So let's get right into them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is address ranges that overlap. So as you can see on my screen in my example, my road center line begins, the address range begins at 100 and it goes to 115. Then we pick up the next road center line at 113, which goes to 130. Well, we can see a problem here. The 113 is also in the first road center line. That's going to cause a problem because if you're routing to a specific address, which road center line is it going to route to? Here's an example of this. I have a road center line, sorry, on Fox Hill Road, and I have another one that picks up Fox Hill Road. And my left goes from 1 to 99, my right goes from 2 to 100, and here on my other road center line, I go from 1 to 399 and 2 to 400. So we have a problem here because road center line overlaps this road center line. So you're pretty much overlapped by 100. So if the call is routed, which road center line does it get called to? If a call comes in at 50 Fox Hill Drive, will it go here or will it go here? So some of the checks I might use to find my address range overlaps are, I would search for my roads, for my street names in my data, and then I group them and then sort them by their address ranges and then I check to see where I have overlaps. All right, so let's move on to our next one. Address point maps to multiple road center lines. So I'm kind of building on my previous example. Again, I have that road center line that goes from 100 to 115, and then it picks up at 113 and goes to 130. But now I'm introducing the address point. So I have 115 Main Street, and as you can see, it maps to this road center line. It's also mapping to this road center line. So that's going to be a problem. Again, if a call comes in for 115 Main, based on my road center lines, it could come up in 2 different locations. So another example of this is I have Kramer Ave. So on my left, I have 614 to 626, and here's my other RCL, my left, 702 to 718. We are looking good. But on my right, you can see I have 703 to 715, 701 to 711. So they are overlapping each other on that right-hand address range. So when you introduce the address points into this, you can see that on the left-hand side, my address points are mapping to my RCLs. Pretty darn good. But let's look at the right-hand side. This is where we're starting to see those problems with the overlaps in those 2 road center lines. Let's look at 705 Kramer Ave. So 705 is being mapped to this road center line at this location. But it's also, if we follow that line all the way up, it's also being mapped to the other road center line at this location. So this is a problem. This is going to cause delays, and this needs to be fixed. So I mentioned that this validation check kind of built on the other that I just talked about. So really the first thing you want to look at is your overlapping road center lines. So you would check for that first. And then the next thing you'd want to check is your address points information. Are the street names correct? That could cause your address points being linked to multiple road center lines. I've seen that as well. So that would be the second thing I would check. Okay, so let's get into the MSA comparison. There are a lot of MSA checks that I could talk about. I'm just going to kind of talk about one, but it might cover a lot. But it's critical to ensure that the RCLs answer the same questions as the MSA for sound call routing in your next generation 911 system. So let's look at that MSA. So in my MSA record, I have one record that is on Mappy Ave in the city of Highlands, and it's an ESN 400. You can see that my low range is 100 and my high is 1399. I found in my data that I have 3 corresponding road center line records that are also on Mappy Ave in the city of Highlands with ESN 400. Okay, great, we're looking great. I look at the low and high in my RCLs, and I see 500 is definitely within the low of 100, and my high of 1399 also matches. So we're looking okay. But why does the MSA record go all the way down to 100? Is that an error in my MSA? Or am I missing a road centerline record? Is something not being covered in my road centerlines? So this has to be checked and verified in your MSA and against your road centerline data. You may have to talk with your MSA coordinator and figure out where the discrepancy is occurring. Okay. So my next one is the address point being out of order. All right, so in this example, my road center line again goes from 100 all the way up to 200. And when I look at the address points that are along this line, I can see that they're looking pretty good. They're moving up in sequential order. But then I do have a problem. My first problem is 61 Main doesn't make any sense. Maybe it's 161. And I also have like a mismatch, an out of order address. So addresses typically follow a sequential order, moving from higher to lower along the center line. So what this validation would check for is to make sure that your addresses are moving up sequentially, numerically sequentially along the road center line. So this might not be an actual error. In real life, maybe this was how the addresses were addressed. If that's the case, you have to still verify and mark that as an exception. In the data, it needs to be verified. Same with your 61 Main Street. And I just wanted to kind of give a real life example of this. This is a street not too far away from where I live. I live in Southern California, and our houses are a little bit on top of each other. So in this case, if I have my addresses out of order, slightly out of order, and there's an emergency at 14 Hamilton Way, if the call is routed to the wrong house, if the emergency vehicles end up at the wrong house in this situation, the response time isn't going to be delayed that much. My hope would be that they'd be able to find the right house pretty quickly. But here's another example. Here's a rural area where I have a road and it's covered in highly dense vegetation. If I were a car driving down this road, I might not even see those houses. They're covered up so much by the trees. I can barely see the driveways. I can see a few of the driveways, but my thinking here is that if a call is routed to 1014, it really needs to make it up to 1014 up here. It's not going to be as easy for the emergency vehicles to locate that house. They can barely even see them. So you can kind of see the importance of your address data being in the right order. Okay, one of my favorites. I'm going to talk about road center lines, your overshoots and your undershoots. So from a GIS perspective, let's look at example number 1. Yes, that does look like an overshoot to me. But let's think about it for a second. What if it's not? What if that blue line actually goes a little bit further and that's an overpass and an underpass? That might not be a true overshoot. It could just be a real life bridge situation. So that needs to be double checked. All right, and then my undershoot, again, depending on how far this is, how far the blue is to the red, that could be a true undershoot. And the GIS in me wants to just snap it and break that red line and say, those are 2 road center lines. But what if that is actually a true dead end? Maybe it dead ends into the railroad tracks, or maybe it's a cul-de-sac that dead ends to the main road. So each one of your overshoots, undershoots do need to be verified and checked out. To do some of your overshoot, undershoot checks, you would just run topology, and then once you get your list of where they occur, you would check them one by one. And I want to give a good example of an undershoot, overshoot situation. We put this graphic together for you. I have station number 1 that's up in the corner on Arizona Lane. And then I have station number 2 that is down in the bottom right, that's on Flagstaff Lane. And then I have an emergency happening on Blue Circle. Okay, if Red Lane truly is an undershoot, then it makes sense that station number 2 would respond to that emergency. As you can see here, station number 2 is deployed and my response time is 4 minutes. But what happens? What if Red Lane isn't an undershoot? What if it does all the way through? As you can see, if station 1 was deployed, it cuts the response time down into 2 minutes. So our data is so important. Something so simple as an undershoot or overshoot really does make a difference. All right, I think I have time to throw in 1 extra validation, so I'm actually going to give you 6. I think it's important to talk about our polygon layers. So our polygon layers play a really important role in Next Generation 911. I mentioned earlier how when the call is taken and I have that location information, I'm doing a point on polygon overlay to route that call to the right PSAP. Okay, so let's say that what I'm showing you here is a PSAP boundary. I see a gap. There's definitely a donut hole here, or a hole. So if a call comes in at this red dot, and I'm doing my point on polygon overlay, what PSAP is it going to deliver that call to? So as you can see, your polygon layers are very important. So some of the checks that you can run are your gaps and your overlaps. You can even compare all of your polygon layers together. For example, you want to make sure your emergency layers fall within your PSAPs. All right, so I know that the time went so fast. I was able to give you 5 validations, and there's so many more. There's just so many more. So if you have any questions about more validations, how you can get your GIS data ready for validations, please feel free to reach out and ask me questions. And with that, I am going to open it back up to Carrie.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions. The first one is from Claudia, and it goes back to where you had the house numbers on the structures and they were out of order.
Right.
The question is, if the address point is on the correct structure, would the emergency responders still go to the wrong structure?
Well, it's a possibility. No matter what, we still want to make sure that our GIS data is correct and that it's accurate and precise before it goes into the next generation 911 system. And yeah, Carrie, if you have anything else to add to that.
I do, actually. I was just going to say, you know, our amazing first responders are not going to be allowing the map only to follow them or to guide them to a location. They're going to be using their situational awareness to locate the right structure. The issue comes with the more rural situation that April had up. If the two structures that are out of synchronization are a half a mile or even a mile apart and maybe down a very long driveway, then a potential delay of service could occur. Our first responders are still always going to find us, but we want to do everything that we can to ensure that they are being led to the right locations, especially on a, you know, on a dispatching side of things as quickly and easily as possible.
Correct.
And then an anonymous attendee, I'm assuming it's one of the phone-in callers, actually had a question. And it's, so what do I do if a road that has been in my city went right to low, and then years later someone added a segment of that road that goes from high to low? So I think it went from low to high, and then they added a segment. They've reversed the address ranging on that.
Yeah, I understand the question. So there will be some situations where you, when you run your validation, you find an issue like that. But if that's truly how the road is addressed and how the road center line was placed, you might not be able to do anything in the GIS, and you can mark it as an. If you have anything else to add to that, go ahead. There are going to be some cases where you mark exceptions in your GIS data because it is not always going to be perfect.
Yeah, I think your audio was breaking up a little bit there, April, but there are some other things that you can potentially do. There are 3 kind of main players in addressing. There's the addressing authority, who typically assigns the address. There's going to be the GIS authority. The validations that April has been talking about are definitely going to be in the GIS world, showing the other groups where there are potential anomalies. And then there's public safety. And you need to make sure that everybody is all on the same page with that. We do have a couple of more questions, and we are at the bottom of the hour. So Rebecca asked, how do you make the fishbone lines?
We have a tool that helps us to create those fish bones. So that's something that we've created in our rules that we have.
And there are, if you are a GIS developer, there is the ability to go in, like if you're working in the Esri environment, to Python script out how to do that. I personally am not a developer, so that eludes me. So I tend to use more rules-based engines. And then Catherine had actually just one final point, and this was related back to our question about the houses being out of order. And her comment really speaks to public education, and it's really important to stress to people that they properly post their addresses on the road and on their structure. And that appears to be all of the questions that we have at the moment. I'd like to thank April for this great presentation. All of these sessions, as I mentioned earlier, are being recorded, and they will be made available the week of April 6th, once we've had an opportunity to amalgamate them all together. And with that, we really appreciate you all attending this session.
Thank you.